So the Life Sciences Conference, this is our second year that we've held this conference. This is a 2-day event where we bring the whole life sciences sector together. What we're trying to do is showcase the technologies that our New Zealand companies are doing in the space to some of their New Zealand challenges, but also some of these global challenges.
Kia ora team, Richard Liew here, editor at nzentrepreneur.co.nz, and today I'm joined by two leaders of the biotech industry. Got John Robson, General Manager, Bridgewest Ventures New Zealand, and also joined by Dr Zahra Champion. She's the Executive Director at BioTech NZ. Welcome to you both. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Zahra, if it's all right, can I just get you to quickly explain who is BioTech NZ?
So BioTech NZ, we're a membership organisation. So we look after the biotech sector across the whole of New Zealand. So when we think of biotech, biotech is a platform, not a sector. So we sit across multiple sectors. So we look after the human health, the environmental space, industrial and ag. So my role within BioTech NZ is to kind of bring the community together. So that's what we do, from networking events. We run conferences, we write reports, and we work right through with the government and the ministers as well around what are the needs of the biotech sector.
All right, cool. And before I ask John to introduce yourself, Zahra, can you define for me what do you think is the missing link between what the public understands biotech is and what it actually is? What should we actually be viewing it as?
I think when people talk about biotech, they think of these kind of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, but actually biotech is just manipulating biological processes. They're very traditional biotech that we use, so plant breeding, animal breeding, anything that we do in the garden. We're growing and we're pollinating, and we're very much using those traditional techniques, which we're using in New Zealand. But it also goes right through those modern technologies as well. So we're starting to hear that technology around CRISPR, and we're able to now starting to modify genes at a very specific level. So when I talk about biotech, it's not a sector, it's a platform, it's a technology, it's another tool in our tool belt that we use. It's across human health, environmental, ag, and industrial. And again, we can use those very traditional, brewing beer, making wine, good examples there, cheese, and we can go right through to our modern technology, which is the cell and gene therapy. We're actually, individually supporting patients who can be treated with these changes to their genetic makeup. So very diverse. That's why it's so complex.
John, if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about your work at Bridgewest Ventures. You're big backers of a number of biotech companies here in New Zealand. What is it that you sort of do on a day-to-day basis? And same question that I posed to Zahra as well, around the general public's understanding around biotech. Have you got anything to add there?
Yeah, sure, Richard. So I'm typically known as JR rather than John. And my role really is as the general manager of Bridgewest Ventures here in New Zealand. So we're a New Zealand-based investment fund operating under the Callahan Innovation Deeptech Incubator Program, which was established about three and a half years ago as an extension of a prior startup program. We're funded out of the US, as you point out, a US investment group. So all of our capital, both operating funding and our investment funding, comes from our US parent as their investment into New Zealand. And we're one of 4 companies that are operating under this Callahan program. So we're alongside Brandon Capital, WNT, and Sprout Agritech. And really my role is to govern and operate the fund and the team, which involves both our pipeline management process, which is run by my colleague Kate DeRitter, and also our investment program itself. So the funds that we put into these companies. So we're wider than just biotech. But biotech is a large part of our portfolio, as you point out. So 7 of our investments are in biotech and medtech. And to expand on what Zahra said, for us, biotech really is technology that uses either a living organism through a manipulation, or actually is for the benefit of humanity by providing a solution to a living organism. So in that way, it encompasses both using biological materials to create technology, and also using other materials to create technologies for living organisms, such as medtech devices, implants, etc. So it's a pretty wide explanation as to what biotech really means. For us, we're really focused on improving human health, but of course, some of our colleagues in the scheme are very focused on animal health.
Yeah, and it really sort of hit me what you said, Zahra, and great analogy that biotech is a platform, not a sector. I think that's a really cool way of being able to understand biotech. Now, John, you recently said, JR, you recently said New Zealand needs to invest more in the biotech research landscape to maximise innovation, and time is of the essence. So can you expand on that a little bit more? What do you mean time is of the essence?
Yeah, so our view is that we've reached a pretty critical path for New Zealand in biotech. There's been many years of underinvestment in facilities and infrastructure. And a lot of the pressure has been put onto the universities and the CRIs to maintain velocity for students and technology. Our role really is to commercialize some of that technology that comes out of the public system. But the problem really is that commercialization is extremely expensive for biotech specifically, requiring purpose-built laboratories, equipment that is often into the millions of dollars. And also the people and the skills that go to manage that equipment and complete the science. So right now we're at a point where, in order to capitalize on the many years of investment that Zahra is very familiar with from the creation of BioTech NZ, we actually have to act now. And the critical path really is that if we don't, then a lot of the resources, the people, a lot of the investment in our infrastructure, say the biotech companies, will simply look overseas, the path of least resistance. And at the moment, we're obviously seriously considering looking at Australia for many of our companies, because primarily they have a tax regime that's conducive to research. They have facilities that are well established and operating, and university tech transfer offices that are looking for talent and obviously funding. For us, that would be a fatal blow, we feel. And because we do have the talent here, we have the throughput from the universities, and we certainly have the research talent within the CRIs. The question is, how do we find the gap around infrastructure? So how do we quickly put in place infrastructure and support for these companies to maintain their roots here? So that's really what we're struggling with at the moment, is how to actually do that.
All right. And Zahra, can you give us a sense, perhaps, what is the current state of biotech's contribution to our country, say on an economic level? How many people work in the sector? I know we just agreed not to call it a sector, but can you give us a bit of an idea about what does it look like for us here, and maybe in contrast to say some of our similarly sized peers?
Yeah, and look, that's a number I would love to be able to give you. And in New Zealand, we don't actually collect that statistics. So I am just going to be really honest and say we don't actually have those numbers, because it is a platform that sits across so many sectors. You'll see some of our very large organisations might only have a very small team in biotech, but play a really important role within the business. So very, very hard to actually collect that data. Now, many years ago, the government actually funded the old organisation that we called NZ Bio to every 2 years to go around and collect this data and collect that information, and they would pull together the size of the sector, the number of people, the growth of the sector, the value to the sector, economic value to New Zealand. We don't actually have that data. There are a number of places where it's sliced and diced. Health tech, the biotech sits in there, clean tech, bit of biotech sits in there. So I am looking at some of the numbers that we wrote in our biotech report, but they're just big numbers. We kind of, extrapolated the bioeconomy, but, they don't actually mean a lot. And so I'm just going to say we don't have those numbers. I do know that New Zealand, in the biotech sector, for the fact that we haven't been able to use new gene technologies, we still punch above our weight, whether it's our kiwi fruit, whether it's our apples, whether it's our livestock, we punch above our weight. And biotech's everywhere.
So I guess the key question though is, how are we doing compared to, say, our neighbours across the ditch, or maybe over the other side of the world? Like, are we ahead of the game? Are we sort of, at where we should be, or?
And I think if we start looking at the New Zealand and the biotech sector, we've got pockets of greatness. We've got companies who are absolutely punching above their weight, internationally leaders. But these are pockets. These are not, and we need more of those. We need to scale up more of those companies. So again, I'm not going to take away from the incredibly hard work that we have for a number of companies who are just absolutely tenacious and will work through really tough environment. But what we do need is we need more of these companies. We need scale up, and we need more technologies coming out of the university. So when we compare ourselves to the rest of the world, as JR mentioned, we are putting out, we punch well above our weight when it comes to our postgraduate researchers coming out of the university, highly skilled, but again, nowhere to go. We need more companies here. We need more technologies here. We need larger international companies investing here, and we need to be able to hold, retain, and grow our talent here.
JR, you mentioned a few sort of potential barriers, I guess, to growth for biotechs here in New Zealand. And, it's always a shame if we lose our, homegrown talent or IP or ideas, because purely we can't assist them on that growth journey. If you had a wish list, right, magic wand, what would be three things you would wish to see immediately that would make it easier to grow and scale our biotechs here in New Zealand?
Yeah, okay, that's a tough question, Richard. Only three. I think the number one has to be an innovation park type activity where you've got a public-private partnership that creates the facilities, the infrastructure, the laboratories, and this collaborative environment that is supportive of the entire, I'll use the word sector, I'm sorry, Zahra, the entire industry. And when I talk about that industry, we're not just talking about biotech in the pure sense of people thinking we're making drugs. We're talking about agricultural technology. We're talking about technology that has an impact on climate change, being able to have more effective and efficient crops, for example. And we're talking really about medical innovation, medtech devices. So having a single facility or a campus that is not a CRO or university that creates this amazing ecosystem of talent, I think, is the number one. The number two is having a more appropriate investment sort of landscape for that type of environment, whether it's through tax benefits, or whether it's through rebates, or whether it's through direct investment by government. I think there are multiple ways to look at it, and they all have their pros and cons from an economic standpoint. But fundamentally, if we're trying to create a new sector in New Zealand, a new industry off the foundation that's been created, we have to think a little differently about how we approach it. It needs to be wider than just the schemes that give back, tax rebates. Then the final one really is the talent and the people. I'm not suggesting for a second that we stop people leaving forcibly. We want them to stay here voluntarily, which means you need to have high-paying jobs. You need to have modern laboratories that they can go to and work from. There's nothing worse than looking at some of the facilities overseas and how amazing they are, and then seeing our young people go over there for what is, a great journey for their career, thinking, why can't we have that? So there's the three big ones that I would start with.
Great. And Zahra, it would be unfair for me not to allow you to also respond to that question. Have you got any others to add, or would you maybe reprioritize some of what JR said?
I think one of the things I would really like to see across all of the governments is that we stick to a long-term vision. And so this doesn't become an election issue. We don't see initiatives start for 3 years and then pulled, or however long that particular government is. what we need to do is we need to set that science, that long-term strategy for New Zealand. And that long-term strategy within that has short, medium, and long-term goals. So again, back to infrastructure. What infrastructure do we have? What infrastructure do we need? And what infrastructure will we never have here? Some of those big pieces of equipment we can't afford to actually have in New Zealand. Who are we going to partner with? How are we going to create that infrastructure? Talent. We grow amazing talent. How do we continue to grow them? How do we continue to nurture them? But how do we also entice talent to come into New Zealand? So we do very much need those long-term roadmaps. What I'd also like to see is realistic goals. So unfortunately, again, we need to see in 3 years big successes. Science is a long game. Most of our drugs to market are still 10 years plus. When we look at our wonderful overnight successes, we talk about, whether it was kind of Pacific Edge, LanzaTech, all of these companies are 10 years plus, and I think that's what I'd really like the government agencies, and also kind of the everyday person to understand this is a long game. This is a long game. And by doing that and being prepared to be in it for the long game, we will start seeing the benefits coming back to certainly to New Zealanders, but also we'll be able to play and be part of the bigger science ecosystem again for those big challenges. So that's what I'd really like to see. There's lots of kind of individual areas where we'd like to see more research coming out of the universities and commercialization, but I think in terms of it's that big picture strategy. In the early 2000s, both New Zealand set a biotech strategy, Australia set a biotech strategy. New Zealand pulled their strategy 10 years later. Australia didn't. You can look at the comparison. It's not easy for them, but they set their path and they've continued on that path. We're almost coming back to where we left off 10 years ago. And now we're kind of having to pull the band back together and get going.
All right, well, now we're almost out of time, but before we go, can you tell us about the Life Sciences Summit? It's coming up on the 11th and 12th of March. Big date on the biotech calendar, I believe.
So the Life Sciences Conference, this is our second year that we've held this conference. This is a 2-day event where we bring the whole life sciences sector together. What we're trying to do is showcase the technologies that our New Zealand companies are doing in the space to some of their New Zealand challenges, but also some of these global challenges. This conference is really key. It's bringing the industry sector together. A number of the scientists will be attending, but it's a very much a industry-focused conference. And what we are doing is we are also informing our government and our agencies some of the requirements that we will need moving forward to make a successful life sciences or biotech sector. Last year, we were very loud about that we need new gene technologies and new regulations. This government heard us and they supported us and supported the sector, and we're moving now forward with the opportunity to start creating a fit-for-purpose gene regulations for New Zealand. This year, what we're wanting to do is ensure that they hear what are those fit-for-purpose regulations, but also the regulations are one part of this ecosystem. And JR talked about those. We need talent, we need funding, we need clear planning, we need these long-term strategies. So that's what this conference is about. Very exciting to bring the sector together.
Awesome, cool. All right, well, look, thank you so much for joining us today. That was Dr Zahra Champion, Executive Director of BioTech New Zealand, and John J.R. Robson, General Manager at Bridgewest Ventures New Zealand. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
You're welcome, thank you.